The ground shook again. Zethka pressed his long fingers against the rough stone wall of the underground shelter. The explosions were getting closer, much closer than yesterday. "How many are left up there?" he asked Nelvo, who sat hunched over. The old communication device, the machine sparked and hissed. Most of its parts were broken now. "Maybe 200 fighters," Nelvo replied without looking up. Her voice was tired. She had been sending distress calls for 3 weeks. No one had answered, not once. Zethka closed his eyes. 200 fighters. That was all they had left to protect 3,000 colonists. The Vrakari had started with 5,000 soldiers. Now they had many more. Ships kept bringing fresh. Troops from their home world. The Altarian colony on Kepler 442b had been peaceful for 50 years. They mined rare crystals from the deep caves and sent them to other planets. They grew food in the green valleys. They raised their children under the warm yellow sun. They never hurt anyone, but the Vakari didn't care about that. They wanted the planet. They wanted the crystals. They wanted the Altarians gone. Another explosion rocked the shelter. Dust fell from the ceiling. The children started crying again. Their mothers held them close and whispered soft words that didn't mean anything anymore. That Z-E-T Kutch walked through the long tunnels carved into the rock. The shelters went deep underground. His people had built them when the attacks first started. They thought the war would last a few days, maybe a week. That was 4 months ago. He found Dex Rowe in the weapon storage room. The old miner was checking their guns. Most of them were mining tools that had been changed to shoot at enemies instead of cutting rock. "The north tunnel is lost," Dex Rowe said. His face was covered in dirt and blood. "The Vakari broke through an hour ago. We sealed it with explosives, but they'll dig through by morning." Zethka nodded. He had expected this. The Vakari were good at war. They had fought many battles before. They had destroyed many worlds. The Altarians had never fought anyone. "What about the children?" Zethka asked. 7 shuttles are ready. We can fit maybe 400 children and some adults to watch them. The rest." Dexro didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The rest would stay. The rest would die. Zetka walked back to the main shelter. Families sat together on the cold stone floor. They shared their last bits of food. They told stories to keep the children calm. They tried to smile, but their eyes were full of fear. Nelvo was still at her communication station. She had been there for days. She barely ate. She barely slept. She just kept sending the same message over and over again. "This is Colony Administrator Zethka of the Altarian settlement on Kepler 442b. We are under attack by the Vakari Empire. 3,000 civilians need immediate help. Our defenses are failing. Please respond. Please help us." But no one came. No one even answered. The Galactic Council had said they would protect small colonies. They had made promises. They had signed papers. But when the Vakari attacked, the Council ships were always somewhere else, fighting other wars, protecting other worlds. Never hear. Zeth sat down beside Nelvo. She looked at him with her large, purple eyes. She was young. Too young to die in a war she never wanted. "Any response?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. She shook her head. "The communication tower fell this morning. I'm using backup power. The signal is weak. Maybe no one can hear us anymore." Above them, the sounds of battle grew louder. The Vakari were pushing closer to the shelter entrances. Their weapons made sharp cracking sounds. Their soldiers shouted in their harsh language. They were excited. They could smell victory. War Commander Grexnall led the Vakari forces. He was tall and strong, with thick armor and many weapons. He enjoyed killing. He had told the colonists this in his first message. He said he would make their deaths slow and painful. He said he would save the children for last. The Altarians were not fighters. They were peaceful people who loved art and music and growing things. They had never learned to hate. Even now, facing death, they could not understand why the Vrakari wanted to hurt them. Zeth-Ka stood up. He had to make the hard choice. The choice he had been avoiding for days. Prepare the shuttles, he told Dexro. Take the children tonight. All of them. Take some adults to care for them. Find a safe place far from here. What about you? Dexro asked. We stay. We fight. We buy time for the shuttles to escape. Dexro grabbed Zeth-Ka's arm. You can't save everyone. Come with us. Live to fight. Another day. Zeth-Ka pulled free. Someone has to stay. Someone has to try. If we all run, the Vrakari will follow. They will hunt down the shuttles. At least if we fight here, we can keep their attention. The ground shook again. This time, pieces of rock fell from the ceiling. The main support beams groaned. The shelter was not built to survive this kind of attack. Nelvo suddenly sat up straight. Her communication device was making a new sound. A sound she had not heard in weeks. Wait, she whispered. Something's coming through. The sound was faint, broken, but it was there. A voice, speaking in a language she had never heard before. This is reconnaissance vessel. Receiving your transmission. Calculating position. Help is coming. Double quotes. The voice faded. Static filled the air. Then silence. Nel-Vo stared at the machine. Her hands shook as she tried to tune the frequency. Did you hear that? Did you hear what I heard? Zeth-Ka knelt beside her. What did it say? Someone answered. Someone is coming. But even as hope flickered in their hearts, the explosions grew closer. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, casting red shadows on the walls. Outside, the Vrakari had begun their final assault. Time was running out. Help was coming, but would it arrive in time? Or would the Altarians be dead before their saviors could find them? In the darkness, 3,000 people held their breath and waited for either salvation or death. 3 light years away, Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm went off. The sharp sound echoed through the small bridge of the UE Stormbreaker. Coffee splashed onto his uniform as he jumped up from his chair. What's the problem? He called out. Lisa Park looked up from her communication station. Her face was pale. Sir, I'm picking up a distress signal. It's weak, but it's definitely there. Jake walked over to her station. The Stormbreaker was a science ship, not a warship. They explored new star systems and looked for planets where humans might live someday. They were not supposed to find anyone else out here. Are you sure it's a distress signal? Jake asked. Lisa nodded. She pressed a button, and strange sounds filled the bridge. The words were in a language no human had ever heard. But the tone was clear. Someone was scared. Someone needed help. How far away is it coming from? Jake asked. Tony Ross, the ship's navigator, checked his instruments. About 3 light years, Captain. The Kepler 442 system. We surveyed it last year. There were no signs of intelligent life. Jake frowned. Well, there are now. Lisa, can you clean up that signal? Lisa worked at her station for several minutes. The ship's computer was very smart, but it had never heard this language before. Slowly, the static began to fade. The alien words became clearer. I'm running it through every language database. We have, Lisa said. The computer is trying to find patterns. Dr. Amy Chun, the ship's science officer, joined them on the bridge. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a quick mind. What do we know about this signal? It's been broadcasting. For about 3 weeks, Lisa replied. The same message over and over. The computer thinks it's some kind of emergency broadcast. Amy studied the readings. The signal strength is dropping. Either they're running out of power, or... She didn't finish the sentence. Jake knew what she meant. Or they were running out of time. Pete Walsh, the chief engineer, came up from the engine room. He was a big man with oil-stained hands and a loud voice. "Captain, I heard the alarm. Are we in trouble?" "Not us," Jake said. "But someone else might be." The computer suddenly made a happy beeping sound. Lisa's eyes went wide. "Captain, I think. We've got it." The computer found enough patterns to start translating. She played the message again. This time, a mechanical voice spoke in English. "This is Colony Administrator Seth Ka of the Altarian settlement on Kepler 442b. We are under attack by the Vrakari Empire. 3,000 civilians need immediate help. Our defenses are failing. Please respond. Please help us." The bridge went quiet. Everyone stared at the speakers. They had just heard the first message from an alien species, and it was a cry for help. 3,000 people, Amy whispered. And someone is attacking them. Jake felt something cold in his stomach. First contact with aliens was supposed to be a happy moment. Scientists and diplomats would meet. They would exchange gifts and learn about each other. They would become friends. This was not that kind of first contact. "Tony, how long would it take to get there?" Jake asked. Tony checked his instruments. "At maximum speed, about 6 hours." "And how long would it take to get a message to Earth?" "Command? 2 weeks for the message to reach them. 2 more weeks for a response. Another month for a fleet to get here." Jake looked around the bridge. His crew of 47 people were scientists, engineers, and explorers. They had never been in a fight. The Stormbreaker had some basic weapons, but they were meant for clearing space debris, not fighting enemy ships. "Captain," Lisa said quietly, "the signal is getting weaker. I think they're running out of time." Jake closed his eyes. He thought about his orders. He was supposed to explore and report back. He was not supposed to get involved in alien wars. But he also thought about the voice in the message. Someone was scared. Someone needed help. "Maria," he called out. Maria Lopez was the ship's security chief. She was a former soldier who had joined the exploration service to see new worlds. She appeared on the bridge quickly. "Yes, Captain? If we went into a combat situation, what could we do?" Maria looked surprised. "Against who?" "Unknown enemy. They've been attacking a peaceful colony for weeks. We don't know how many ships they have or what weapons they use." Maria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Captain, we're not a warship. We have 47 people. Most of them are scientists. Our weapons are designed for mining and clearing space junk. But could we help?" Maria looked at the faces around her. She saw Lisa, who was still trying to clean up the alien signal. She saw Amy, who was studying the readings with her scientific mind. She saw Pete, who could fix anything. She saw Tony, who knew every star in this part of space. "Maybe," she said, "if we're smart about it, if we're lucky." Jake nodded. He pressed a button that would send his voice through the whole ship. "All hands, this is the captain. Report to the main deck for an emergency meeting." Within minutes, all 47 crew members were gathered in the ship's main room. Jake stood in front of them and told them about the signal. He told them about the aliens who needed help. He told them about the choice they had to make. "We're not soldiers," he said. "We're explorers. But we've discovered something terrible. Innocent people are dying, and we're the only ones who can help them." Dr. Chun spoke up. "What about the Prime Directive?" "We're not supposed to interfere in alien conflicts." Jake had been thinking about that. The Prime Directive says we don't interfere in normal alien development. But this isn't normal. This is genocide. If we do nothing, an entire species might die. Pete raised his hand. Captain, what can we actually do? We have mining lasers and scientific equipment. We're not fighters. That's what we need to figure out, Jake said. Pete, could you modify our equipment? Turn our mining lasers into weapons? Pete scratched his head. Maybe. The mining lasers are pretty powerful. And we have those deep space probes. I could turn them into missiles. Maria, could you train the crew for combat? Maria looked around the room. She saw engineers and scientists and computer specialists. She saw people who had never held a weapon. But she also saw determination in their eyes. I can try, she said. We have some basic training equipment. And everyone here is smart. They learn fast. Jake looked at his crew. These people had followed him across the galaxy. They had explored dangerous worlds and faced unknown dangers. They trusted him to make the right choice. I won't order anyone to do this, he said. This is volunteer only. If you want to help, stay. If you want to go back to Earth, I understand. Nobody moved. Not one person left the room. Lisa stood up. Captain, I've been listening to that signal for hours. I can hear the fear in their voices. They're dying, and they don't know why. If we can help them, we have to try. One by one, the other crew members nodded. They were scared, but they were also angry. Somewhere out there, innocent people were being killed, and they were the only ones who could stop it. All right, Jake said. Tony, set course for the Kepler 442 system. Maximum speed. Pete, start working on those weapon modifications. Maria, begin combat training. Lisa, keep trying. To contact the aliens, let them know help is coming. As the crews scattered to their tasks, Jake remained on the bridge. He looked out at the stars and wondered what they would find when they arrived. He wondered if they would be too late. He wondered if his small crew of explorers could really make a difference. But he knew they had to try. Because that's what humans did. When someone needed help, they helped. Even if it was dangerous. Even if it seemed impossible. The Stormbreaker turned toward the Kepler 442 system and began its race against time. The Stormbreaker dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge and stared at the main screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. Dozens of enemy ships surrounded the planet. They were big and dark, with sharp edges and glowing red lights. They fired their weapons at the planet's surface again and again. Each blast lit up the darkness of space like deadly fireworks. My God, whispered Dr. Amy Chun. How many ships are there? Tony. Ross checked his instruments. I count 37 vessels. Most of them are warships. They have the planet completely surrounded. Jake watched the bombardment continue. Every few seconds, another explosion bloomed on the planet's surface. Somewhere down there, the aliens who had sent the distress call were trying to survive. Lisa, can you contact the colony? Jake asked. Lisa worked at her communication station. The signal is very weak, Captain. One think most of their communication equipment has been destroyed. Jake felt a moment of despair. They had traveled 3 light years to help, but they had arrived too late. The colony was probably already destroyed. Then Lisa suddenly sat up straight. Wait, I'm getting something. It's faint, but it's there. She adjusted the controls, and a voice came through the speakers. It was weak and full of static, but they could understand it. This is Nelvo of the Altarian colony. Is someone there? Please respond. Jake grabbed the microphone. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Human Federation ship Stormbreaker. We received your distress call. We're here to help. There was a long pause. Then Nelvo's voice came back, stronger now. Humans? We have never heard of humans. But you came. You actually came. Jake could hear the relief in her voice. And something else. Hope? How many survivors are there? Jake asked. About 2,000 in the underground shelters. But the Vakari are breaking through our defenses. We have maybe a few hours before they reach us. Jake looked around the bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting for orders. They all knew the situation was hopeless. One small exploration ship against 37 warships. It was suicide, but Jake had made his choice 6 hours ago. They were here to help, no matter the sin. Cost. Pete, are the weapon modifications ready? Jake asked. Pete Walsh nodded. The mining lasers are now focused beam weapons. They're much more powerful than before. And I've converted 20 scientific probes into guided missiles. Maria, how's the crew training going? Maria Lopez looked grim. They're ready, Captain. They're scared, but they're ready. Jake turned to Tony. Can you get us close to the planet without being detected? Tony studied his navigation displays. There's an asteroid field on the far side of the system. I can use it for cover. But once we attack, they'll know we're here. That's the plan, Jake said. We hit them hard and fast. Cause as much damage as possible. Dr. Chong looked worried. Captain, we're heavily outnumbered. Even with our modifications. We can't fight all those ships. We don't have to fight all of them, Jake replied. We just have to hurt them enough to make them reconsider. Show them this won't be an easy victory. Jake opened a channel to the whole ship. All hands, this is the captain. We're going into battle. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But down on that planet, 2,000 innocent people are counting on us. We're going to give them a fighting chance. The Stormbreaker moved carefully through the asteroid field. The ship's stealth systems were designed to hide them from detection while they studied planets. Now they were using those same systems to approach an enemy fleet. Lisa continued talking to Nelvo, gathering information about the enemy forces. The Vakari have been attacking for months, she told Jake. They want the planet for its rare mineral deposits. They don't care about the colonists. What about their ground forces? Jake asked. About 5,000 soldiers. They're well armed and experienced. The colonists are just miners and farmers. They've been fighting with converted mining equipment. Jake felt anger building in his chest. These Vakari were bullies, attacking innocent people who couldn't fight back. Well, they were about to learn what happened when bullies met someone who could fight back. Captain, Tony said quietly, wearing position. The asteroid field is hiding us from their sensors. Jake looked at the enemy fleet on the main screen. The ships were spread out around the planet, confident in their overwhelming advantage. They had no idea a human ship was watching them. Maria, take your team to the shuttle bay. Be ready for boarding actions. Maria nodded and left the bridge with 6 crew members. They were armed with the ship's emergency weapons and some tools. Pete had modified for combat. Lisa, open a channel to the enemy fleet. All frequencies. Lisa's fingers flew over her controls. Channel open, Captain. Jake took a deep breath. This was it. He was about to announce humanity's presence to the galaxy. He hoped he was making the right choice. Attention Vakari fleet. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Human Federation vessel Stormbreaker. You are attacking innocent civilians. Cease your bombardment immediately and withdraw from this system. The response came quickly. A harsh voice speaking in broken English filled the bridge. Human ship, you are trespassing in Vakari space. You have no authority here. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Jake recognized the voice of someone used to being obeyed. Someone who had never been challenged. This is your final warning, Jake said. Stop the attack or we will stop you. The alien voice laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. You are one small ship. We are many. You will die quickly. Jake nodded to Tony. Take us out of the asteroid field. Let them see us. The Stormbreaker emerged from hiding and moved toward this enemy fleet. On the main screen, they could see the Vakari ships turning to face them. The nearest warship was 10 times their size. Target the lead ship, Jake ordered. Pete, prepare the modified mining lasers. Lasers ready, Captain. Lisa, record this message and broadcast it to the colony. Tell them help has arrived. Jake watched the enemy ship growing larger on the screen. In a few seconds, they would be in weapons range. His crew of 47 explorers and scientists was about to fight a war. All stations, battle stations. Jake announced, "This is for the colonists. This is for every innocent person who has ever been attacked by bullies. Show them what humans can do." The Vakari warship fired first. Red energy beams lanced out toward the Stormbreaker. But Tony was already moving, using the ship's maneuvering thrusters to dodge the incoming fire. "Return fire!" Jake shouted. The modified mining lasers blazed to life. Blue-white beams of concentrated energy struck the enemy ship's shields. The shields flickered and failed under the unexpected power of the human weapons. "Direct hit," Pete called out. "Their shields are down." The Vakari ship tried to turn away, but the Stormbreaker was much faster. Tony used the ship's superior maneuverability to stay behind the enemy vessel, where most of its weapons couldn't reach. "Launch missiles." Jake ordered .4 of Pete's converted probes streaked toward the enemy ship. They struck the hull with devastating force, tearing holes in the armor and causing internal explosions. On the communication channel, they could hear confused voices speaking in the Vakari language. The enemy commanders were trying to understand what was happening. "How are we doing so much damage?" Dr. Chon asked. "Their weapons are designed for long-range bombardment," Jake explained. "They're not used to close combat, and our mining lasers are much more focused than their military weapons." The first Vakari ship began to drift, its engines damaged and its weapons offline. But there were 36 more ships in the fleet, and they were all turning toward the Stormbreaker. "Captain," Lisa said urgently, "I'm getting a message from the colony. The ground bombardment has stopped. The Vakari are confused by our attack." Jake smiled grimly. "Good. That gives the colonists more time. Tony, prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're about to have a lot of company." The battle for Kepler 442b was just beginning. One human ship against an entire alien fleet. The odds were impossible, but Jake and his crew were determined to fight. They had come too far to give up now. The Stormbreaker turned toward the next enemy ship, ready to show the galaxy what humans would do to protect innocent life. The Stormbreaker moved through the Vakari fleet like a deadly dance. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair as the ship twisted and turned between the enemy vessels. Tony Ross flew like a man possessed, using every trick he had learned. In 20 years of piloting, incoming missiles. Dr. Amy Chun called out from her station. "I see them," Tony replied calmly. He rolled the ship sideways and dove toward the planet's surface. The Vakari missiles followed, but they were too slow. Tony led them into the upper atmosphere, where they burned up in the planet's air. "Nice flying," Jake said. "Pete, how are our weapons?" Pete Walsh grinned from the engineering station. "The mining lasers are working perfectly. Better than I hoped. And we still have 16 missiles left." Jake watched the tactical display. They had damaged or destroyed 6 enemy ships, but there were still over 30 left. The Vakari were learning to work together, trying to trap the human ship between multiple vessels. "Lisa, what's the status on the colony?" Jake asked. "The ground bombardment has completely stopped," Lisa Park reported. "The Vakari ground forces are confused. Some of them are pulling back to defensive positions. That was good news. Every minute the bombardment was stopped gave the colonists more time to survive. "Captain," Maria Lopez's voice came over the communicator. "We're ready for the boarding action." Jake had been thinking about this. The Vrakari ships were too big and too heavily armed to destroy with their limited weapons. But maybe they could capture one. "Maria, take your team to Shuttle Bay 2. We're going to try something crazy." Jake turned to Tony. "Can you get us close to that command ship, the big one with all the communication arrays?" Tony studied the tactical display. "It's heavily defended, but if we come at it from the planet's shadow, we might surprise them." "Do it." The Stormbreaker dove toward the planet, using its gravity to accelerate. The ship's hull began to glow as they skimmed the upper atmosphere. Then Tony pulled up sharply, using the planet's gravity to slingshot them toward the command ship. "There." "Not expecting this," Amy said, watching the enemy ship on the main screen. "Their weapons are designed for long-range combat. They can't track us at this distance." Jake opened a channel to the shuttle bay. "Maria, your go for launch. Remember, we need their communication system intact." "Understood, Captain." The shuttle bay doors opened, and Maria's team launched in 2 of the ship's scientific shuttles. Pete had modified them with extra armor and weapons. They weren't proper assault craft, but they would have to do. "Cover the shuttles," Jake ordered. "Give them a path to the command ship." The Stormbreaker's weapons blazed to life. The mining lasers cut through the vacuum of space, striking the command ship's defensive turrets. The focused beams were incredibly precise, destroying weapon systems without damaging the ship's hull. "This is crazy," Amy muttered. "We're actually winning." Jake watched the shuttles approach the command ship. The Vrakari were trying to stop them, but the human ship was providing too much covering fire. The enemy couldn't concentrate on both threats at once. "Shuttles are docking," Lisa reported. Maria's team is boarding the command ship. On the communication channel, they could hear the sounds of fighting. Maria and her team were moving through the enemy ship, using modified tools and emergency weapons against trained soldiers. "Lisa, start jamming their communications," Jake ordered. "I want them confused and scared." Lisa's fingers flew over her controls. Suddenly, the Vrakari communication channels filled with static and noise. But that wasn't all. She began broadcasting something else on their frequencies. Human music. Loud, aggressive battle songs from Earth's history. The fierce sounds of drums and electric guitars filled the enemy channels. "What is that noise?" came a panicked voice in the Vrakari language. "It's psychological warfare," Jake explained to his crew. "The Vrakari have never heard anything like human music. It's designed to pump up our adrenaline and make us fight harder. To them, it probably sounds like the roar of monsters." The effect was immediate. The enemy ships began to move more erratically. Their formation broke apart as individual captains tried to escape the terrifying sounds. "Captain," Maria's voice came over the radio, "we've reached the command center. There are about 20 Vrakari in here, but they're surrendering. I think our music scared them." Jake smiled. "Good work. Can you access their communication system?" "Pete's modifications are working perfectly. I can broadcast on all their frequencies." "Do it. Send them false orders. Tell them to retreat." For the next few minutes, the Vrakari fleet received conflicting orders. Some ships were told to attack the planet. Others were told to retreat. A few were ordered to attack their own allies. The result was chaos. Several enemy ships collided as they tried to follow contradictory orders. Others began firing on each. Thinking they were traitors. "Dr. Chun, can you coordinate with the colonists?" Jake asked. "They might be able to help with ground targets." Amy opened a channel to the colony. "Nelvo, this is Dr. Chun on the human ship. Can you identify?" Vakari ground positions for us? Yes, came the reply. We've been watching them for months. I can send you their coordinates. Jake watched the information come in. The Vakari had concentrated their forces around the colony's main entrances. They were preparing for a final assault. Tony, can you give us a low pass over the colony? Jake asked. I can do better than that, Tony replied. I can thread us through their mountain range. Use the terrain to hide our approach. The Stormbreaker dove toward the planet's surface again. This time, they stayed low, flying between the mountains and valleys. The ship's sensors mapped every Vakari position. Targets acquired, Pete announced. I have clear shots on their ground. Forces, Lisa, warn the colonists take cover, Jake ordered. We're coming in hot. The human ship burst over the colony like a thunderbolt. The mining lasers struck with surgical precision, hitting Vakari positions while avoiding the areas. Where colonists were hiding, the effect was devastating. The Vakari ground forces had never faced an attack from above. Their weapons were designed for fighting other ground troops, not spacecraft. Direct hits on all targets, Pete reported. The ground forces are scattering. Jake opened a channel. To the colony. This is Captain Morrison. The immediate threat to your shelters has been eliminated, but we're not done yet. From the planet's surface, Zethka's voice came back strong and clear. Captain Morrison, we cannot thank you enough. But there are still many enemy ships in orbit. We know, Jake replied. We're working on that. Jake looked at the tactical display. They had reduced the enemy fleet by nearly half, but there were still 15 ships left. And those ships were finally getting organized. Captain, Lisa said. Urgently, the remaining Vakari ships are forming up. They're going to try to overwhelm us with a coordinated attack. Jake nodded. This was what he had been expecting. The Vakari were done being confused and scared. Now they were angry. All stations, prepare for the final battle, Jake announced. Maria, get back to the ship. We're going to need all hands. On our way, Captain. The Stormbreaker climbed away. From the planet's surface, preparing to face the remaining enemy fleet. 15 ships against one. The odds were still terrible, but they had already accomplished the impossible. Tony, remember what I taught you about fighter tactics, Jake said. Stay mobile. Don't let them pin us down. Understood, Captain. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were exhausted, but they were also determined. They had come here to save innocent lives, and they weren't going to quit now. Lisa, send a message to the colony. Tell them to get ready for evacuation if we don't make it. Yes, sir. Jake opened a channel to the Vakari fleet. This is Captain Morrison. You've lost half your ships to one human vessel. I'm offering you one last chance to retreat. The response came from War Commander Grexnall himself. His voice was filled with rage and hatred. Human, you have humiliated the Vakari Empire. For that, you will die slowly. We'll see about that, Jake replied. The final battle was about to begin. The Stormbreaker turned toward the enemy fleet, ready to face whatever came next. They had already saved the colony, but now they had to save themselves. The storm was far from over. The 15 remaining Vakari ships moved toward the Stormbreaker in a tight formation. War Commander Grexnall had learned from his earlier mistakes. No more single ships attacking alone. No more confusion. This time, they would surround the human vessel and destroy it with overwhelming firepower. Captain Jake Morrison watched them approach on the main screen. His crew had been fighting for 6 hours straight. They were tired, but they were not beaten. Tony, remember the asteroid field where we started? Jake asked. Tony Ross nodded. You want to lead them back there? Exactly. Those rocks might help even the odds. The Stormbreaker turned away from the planet and headed for the asteroid field. The Vakari fleet followed, thinking the humans were trying to escape. They're taking the bait, Dr. Amy Chun reported. All 15 ships are pursuing us. Jake smiled grimly. Good. Lisa, can you contact Maria's shuttle? Yes, Captain. They're still in the captured command ship. Tell them to stay hidden. When the shooting starts, I want them to cause more confusion in the enemy ranks. The Stormbreaker entered the asteroid field with the enemy fleet close behind. Tony began weaving between the floating rocks, using his superior knowledge of the area to his advantage. Pete, how many missiles do we have left? Jake asked. 12, Captain. And the mining lasers are still at full power. Jake nodded. Save the missiles for the big targets. We'll need them. The first Valkyrie ship entered the asteroid field and immediately crashed into a large rock. The pilot had been so focused on chasing the human ship that he hadn't watched where he was going. 1 down, 14 to go, Amy said, but the other enemy ships were more careful. They spread out and moved slowly through the asteroids, keeping their weapons trained on the Stormbreaker. Multiple targets acquiring lock, Lisa warned. They're going to fire everything at once. Not if I can help it, Tony muttered. He dove the ship toward a cluster of large asteroids. Just as the enemy opened fire, red energy beams filled the space where the Stormbreaker had been. Instead of hitting the human ship, they struck the asteroids. The rocks exploded in spectacular fashion, sending fragments flying in all directions. Several of those fragments struck the nearest Valkyrie ships, damaging their hulls and shields. Return fire. Jake ordered. The Stormbreaker's weapons blazed. To life, the mining lasers cut through the debris field and struck 2 enemy ships. One lost its main engines and began drifting helplessly. The other exploded when the beam hit its weapon storage. Direct hits, Pete called out. 2 more down. But the remaining 12 ships were learning to use the asteroids for cover, just like the humans. The battle became a deadly game of hide and seek among the floating rocks. Captain, Maria's voice came over the radio. We're in position, ready to cause trouble. Do it, Jake replied. From inside the captured command ship, Maria and her team began broadcasting new false orders. But this time, they were smarter about it. Instead of obvious contradictions, they sent subtle commands that made the Valkyrie ships move into dangerous positions. Ship 7, adjust your position 2 degrees starboard. Maria's voice said in perfect Valkyrie language. Thanks to the ship's translation computer, the Valkyrie ship obeyed without question. It moved directly into the path of another vessel's weapons. When that ship fired at the Stormbreaker, it accidentally hit its own ally instead. Excellent work, Maria, Jake said. Keep it up. The battle continued for another hour. The Stormbreaker used its speed and agility to stay ahead of the enemy, striking when it could and hiding when it had to. The Valkyrie ships, designed for overwhelming firepower, struggled to fight in the confined space of the asteroid field. One by one, the enemy vessels were destroyed or disabled. Some fell victim to the human ship's precise weapons. Others were tricked into destroying each other by Maria's false commands. A few simply crashed into asteroids while trying to maneuver in the unfamiliar terrain. Finally, only 3 ships remained. War Commander Grex Null's flagship and 2 escort vessels. Captain, Lisa said, I'm receiving a transmission from the enemy commander. Put it through, Jake replied. Grex Null's voice filled the bridge. For the first time, he sounded uncertain. Human Captain, you have fought well, but this ends now. Surrender, and I will give you a quick death. Jake picked up the microphone. War Commander, you came here to destroy innocent people. You've lost most of your fleet to 1 small ship. I think it's time for you to surrender. There was a long pause. Then Grex Null's voice came back, filled with rage. Never. The Valkyrie. Empire does not surrender to inferior species. Then you've made your choice, Jake said sadly. The final battle was brief. The 3 remaining Vakari ships tried to surround the Stormbreaker, but they were too few and too damaged. Tony flew circles around them, while Pete's weapons picked them apart piece by piece. The last escort ship exploded in a brilliant flash. Grex Knoll's flagship, its engines destroyed and its weapons offline, began to drift toward a large asteroid. "This is your last chance," Jake broadcast to the enemy. "Commander, abandon ship. I won't let you die if you surrender." But there was no response. The Vakari flagship struck the asteroid and broke apart. War Commander Grex Knoll had chosen death over defeat. The battle was over. The Stormbreaker floated alone among the asteroids, surrounded by the wreckage of the enemy fleet. After 8 hours of continuous fighting, the silence felt strange. "All enemy ships destroyed or disabled," Amy reported quietly. "The planet is secure." Jake slumped in his command chair. They had done it. 47 humans in one small ship had defeated an entire invasion fleet. It seemed impossible, but it had happened. "Lisa, contact the colony. Tell them they're safe." Few minutes later, Zethka's voice came over the speakers. "Captain Morrison, we don't know how to thank you. You saved our entire species." "You don't need to thank us," Jake replied. "We just did what was right." Over the next few days, the Stormbreaker helped the colonists repair their settlements and tend to their wounded. Dr. Chun worked with Altarian scientists to establish proper communication protocols. Pete helped fix their power systems and communication equipment. The humans learned about Altarian culture and history. The aliens had been peaceful for thousands of years, focusing on art, science, and philosophy. They had never imagined that species like the Vakari existed. "Your people are remarkable," Sethka told Jake during one of their meetings. "You risked everything to help strangers. We have never encountered such courage." Jake shrugged. "We couldn't just stand by and watch genocide happen. That's not who we are." Nelvo, the young communication officer who had sent the original distress call, became fascinated with human technology and culture. She spent hours with Lisa, learning about Earth and its people. "I want to be an ambassador," she told Jake. "I want to help our species become friends." On the 4th day, long-range sensors detected new ships approaching the system. Jake was concerned until he recognized the energy signatures. They were human vessels Admiral Susan Blake arrived with, a full fleet of Earth Defense Force ships. She was a stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had come expecting to find the Stormbreaker destroyed and the colony in ruins. Instead, she found a peaceful planet where humans and aliens were working together to rebuild. "Captain Morrison," she said when she beamed aboard the Stormbreaker, "your report makes for interesting reading." "One exploration ship against an entire enemy fleet?" "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied. "We couldn't just stand by and watch." Admiral Blake looked around the bridge at Jake's crew. They were still tired from the battle, but they were proud of what they had accomplished. "You broke about 50 regulations," she said sternly. Then she smiled. "And I couldn't be more proud of you." The Admiral's fleet took up defensive positions around the planet, while diplomats from Earth began formal first contact procedures with the Altarians. Nelvo was chosen as the first Altarian ambassador to humanity, while Lisa volunteered to stay as the human representative on Kepler 442b. 3 weeks later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the Stormbreaker, watching construction crews building a joint human-Altarian space station in orbit. Ships from both species worked side by side, the beginning of what would become a strong alliance. "Captain," Amy Chun said, joining him at the window, "we've received new orders. Earth Command wants us to explore the Centauri sector. Apparently, there have been some unusual energy readings." Jake nodded. "More aliens to meet, I suppose." "Probably," Amy agreed. Are you ready for that? Jake thought about the past month. They had made first contact with an alien species, fought and won an impossible battle, and helped establish humanity's first interstellar alliance. It had been the adventure of a lifetime, but somewhere out there, other species might need help. Other bullies might be threatening innocent people, and the Stormbreaker and her crew would be ready to respond. Set course for the Centauri sector, Jake told Tony. Let's see what else is out there. As the ship prepared to leave orbit, Jake received one final message from Zeth Ka. Captain Morrison, the Altarian people will never forget what you did for us. You showed us that in a galaxy full of darkness, there are still those who bring light. Jake smiled as he read the message. That was what humanity was all about. When someone needed help, they helped. When someone was in trouble, they came running, even if it was dangerous.